Hi, Ellie. So, what
Hi.
are we talking about today?
Well, I'd just like to ask you a couple of questions about
Okay.
the FDA industry.
Okay.
Um, so, what are some of the key challenges that sponsors and drug manufacturers encounter in recruiting participants for clinical trials?
Well, 9 out of 10 trials are either delayed or or cost more, or many times stop because they can't find enough patients for their trial. And there are many reasons. People in general are very skeptical of clinical trials, particularly in the US. And particularly if you talk to minorities and underserved populations, they have a lot of reservations about being in clinical trials. And they're based on multiple perceptions, misperceptions. Some of them are based on a very antiquated history of clinical trials from 50 to 70 years ago. Certain things happened which led a bad taste for many people in many communities, and they're naturally hesitant to be a part of a clinical trial. Other is also access, availability. Many trials are not available in underserved areas. There are very few minority investigators. There are very few trials done in poorer parts of the country. They're mostly done in large hospital centers, large clinics in big cities, where many people don't have access to those doctors, don't have access to those sites. So there are multiple reasons why it is so hard. So it works both ways. As companies, we want to find patients, and patients want to find trials, but we are not in the same place. We are in different places. We as companies go to those large centers, go to those famous doctors, those really big doctors who most people are not going to them. And similarly, patients are looking for trials, but they don't have trials at the doctors that they work with them. So it's the fault is on both sides. Industry hasn't done really much to encourage participation by minorities and underserved populations. We have not gone and recruited investigators in that community very effectively. And of course, patients, because of their history and skepticism and all the other reasons that you can find out, they just don't have access to it. So there are some efforts that people have put in, FDA and NIH, and there are a lot of non-profit and for-profit groups that have understood the importance of involving more people in trials, but it takes time. Right now, at this stage, based on the numbers that we have recently, about 3 to 5% of patients in our country participate in clinical trials, which, if you think about, is really, that means 95% people do not. There is only, if you look at the doctors, it's even worse. Only 1 to 2% of doctors in this country participate in clinical trials. That means 98% of doctors don't, which is a huge gap. It's both good and bad. It's bad, obviously, it's bad because we don't have enough trials to do and we have enough issues with it. It's good because that shows you there's so much room to grow. Even if we double or triple the number of investigators, the number of sites in the country, we could change the entire dynamic of clinical trials, which in turn will lead to reduction in cost and access and availability. Clinical trials offer state-of-the-art treatments. These treatments are not available. You cannot get, even if you have insurance, you can't get that. Forget if you're not with insurance. So these treatments you get for free in clinical trials, and patients don't know that, and we have all this gap because of it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, should I just move on?
Yes,
to the
please,
second question?
please.
Okay, great.
I'm all yours.
Okay, great. Another question that I do have for you is, what have well-established companies such as CVS, why did they recently exit the clinical trial industry?
So it's all about access. We talk about who sees these patients most commonly, right? Typically, when you do clinical trials, you find a doctor who says he has patients who has that particular disease, and the doctor recruits the patients from within his population. That's the most common way clinical trials are done. Now, since there are only 1% of the doctors doing it, that means you have access to only a small percentage of patients. Actually, study after study has shown that when a doctor talks to their patients about a trial, patients are more inclined, about 40% higher chance of patients enrolling in clinical trials than if they go to a doctor they don't know. If you go to a normal physician, the physician talks to you about different options, that you trust the doctor, you've been going to the doctor. If that doctor tells you about a clinical trial, you are more inclined to be in that trial than somebody else. Now, who has the most access to patients all over? So we have this issue of 1% doctors. We cannot do anything. We have been trying to do that. it's still pretty small number. So what's the next best thing? The next best thing is your pharmacy. Everybody goes to a pharmacy. If you look at CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, Kroger's, and a few other chains, they account for pretty much everybody in the country goes to them to get their prescriptions, right? So CVS, for example, has thousands of outlets in the country that go to, first of all, the most remote parts of the country could have a CVS there, and they're writing prescriptions over there. So patients who have certain diseases are going to those sites, right? Same thing, Walgreens, Walmart, take any example, Target, Costco. So the idea is very simple. If CVS is pitching trials to these patients will be more inclined to participate in trials. That's what the whole idea was. Okay, if the doctor tells them, they'll be inclined to participate. If the pharmacist tell them, you would also have a high chance of participating in a trial, right? So that was the hypothesis under which CVS started it 2 years ago. They said they're going to start offering clinical trial services at their outlets, but they executed it very poorly. It was very poorly done. They kind of didn't treat it with the same respect that they would any other business vertical. They took it as, okay, all we need to do is put a few posters, maybe train a few people here and there, and they will talk to people. But that doesn't work. I mean, clinical trials require special training. It requires time. You have to have people who are trained to talk about clinical trials, to talk to your patients. Now, a pharmacist who's very busy doing 100 other things, asking them in a busy pharmacy to talk to somebody for a clinical trial is very unrealistic. Imagine a pharmacist where people are in line waiting to get prescription. This pharmacist has to fill the prescription within minutes. Okay, or they will lose customers. People will stop coming to CVS for their prescriptions, and CVS will lose their core business. So these pharmacists are under pressure to fill prescriptions quickly. They don't have time to talk to the patients. Same thing happens with clinics. Doctors run clinical trials like it's an extra thing. It's not a main thing. So when patients come, they're more interested in giving them the treatment, getting them out of the door so they can see more patients. They don't want to spend an hour talking to somebody about a trial. You need doctors who do it seriously, would hire coordinators, would hire special staff whose job would be to follow up with those patients and talk to them about it, right? So CVS didn't do that. And obviously after 2 years, they got no trials. They had nothing to do. So they had to close it down. And I fear the same is true with Walmart and Walgreens and Kroger's, because they're following the same model as CVS. They all came after CVS. They all literally copied CVS. And they are all literally copying CVS down the hole as well. Because I've been to Walmart, I've not seen much anybody coming to me for a clinical trial.
Right.
I've been to Kroger's, I've been to Walgreens. You probably got a prescription for something.
Yeah.
Did your pharmacist talk to you about a trial?
Never.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely
right?
never.
So I fear it's not about size of the company. It's how serious they are about it. These things are not rocket science. This is easy to do. But these people, for whatever reason, they never looked at it as a real business. And that's the problem globally within the US. That's the problem. We don't look at clinical trials as a business. You know, people who look at business are contractors, CROs like us. Okay, of course we go and talk to people, but I'm not a physician. I don't have a pharmacy, so patients don't come to me. The people we talk to are the people who don't look at it that way. So it becomes like it's an unending circle, unending loop of information where the people who need it and people who can provide it are not connected.
Okay.
So CVS is a classical example. There are many examples like that. Amazon is also tried that. Google also tried that. But Amazon and Google also have not really so far. I mean, again, if something is there that nobody knows about it, then I also don't know about it. But so far, I haven't heard any success stories from Amazon helping to recruit patients. I have not seen an uptick in the number of people participating in clinical trials in the country in the last 5 years. There is actually a downswift of the number of minorities and underserved people participating in trials. In the pandemic, we lost a lot of clinics and doctors who were working in underserved areas to do clinical trials. We lost them. So actually, there was a survey that came out a few days ago, which I think a couple of weeks back, which said that actually it has gone down. The participation has gone down about 50% during the pandemic. So not only we're not doing well, we're actually doing worse than before, which is, again, as a professional, it's pretty sad.
Mhm.
It's disappointing.
Yeah.
But we can't blame anybody else but ourselves for that.
Mhm.
We have to put efforts into it, and we haven't.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Wow. Is inadequate communication or the lack of trust between sponsors and doctors, as well as doctors and patients, a primary factor in contributing to patient recruitment and retention issues?
Absolutely. I think it connects to the previous two questions, previous two answers I
Yeah.
gave you. It's about um, it's about talking to your patient and explaining to them why being in a trial is in their favor, is helpful to them. And not every patient would qualify. Okay, clinical trials have very strict criteria for recruiting. Patients have to meet certain criteria to be in a trial. So not everybody would qualify, but more people than currently are would qualify, and that in turn would lead to because when people, it's another thing that people have shown in survey after survey, is the people who participate in trials, they tell their friends, they tell their families about it, they encourage other people to participate also. It's a domino effect. So um, even if a patient doesn't enroll, they are going to tell somebody else so they know. Okay, they're going to feel better about a trial in general. We have so much misperception. Clinical trials are made fun in media, in movies. Anytime I see a movie showing a person participating in clinical trials and getting hurt, I cringe about it, because that's an impossibility. That will never happen. Somebody goes to goes to a clinical trial and suddenly their hair falls off or something bad happens to them. Those things never happen. Okay, and I should not say never. People can have side effects, but those kind of serious side effects, that the way they dramatize in movies and other places, they don't happen now. Maybe they happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. But clinical trial industry, the regulation of clinical trial industry, and the sophistication of the industry has come a long way. We are not doing trials the way we used to do 50 years ago. We don't have the same protection we had 50 years ago. We're much more protected. We're lot more information exchange. There's a lot more training, a lot more skilled people, a lot more awareness about risk, a lot more monitoring of risk. So because of that, patients who are participating in trials are not at any risk more than what they would have with any treatment. You get a prescription, your prescription could have a side effect. Every drug, if you listen to any ad on TV, it's mostly about side effects, right?
Yeah.
Those are FDA approved drugs. So any drug, even prescription drugs, can have side effects. Okay, so the amount of side effects that one can expect in a clinical trial are no different from what you would expect from any prescription drug. So for that matter, the misperception is killing us more than the actual facts, which is ironic, but it's true.
Following up from what you were previously speaking about, what are some better ways that we can enhance participation and enrollment in clinical trials?
I think education is the number one, and education being more widely spread. I think we have, in the last 15-20 years, the drugs that have been approved in the US have been based on almost 80% Caucasian participants. Okay, 80%. It's a very large number if you think about it.
Yeah.
Yes, we are majority Caucasian, so the country's population is 60% Caucasian, I think. So it's a higher proportion. And the African Americans and the Latinos and Asians and other underserved community, Native Americans, are grossly underrepresented in the clinical trials. So, and again, some of it is, I think I blame the communities also. They don't want to know about it. The misperceptions keep circulating. There are doctors from those communities and community workers from those communities who should put more effort. And actually, I personally, when I do clinical trials, I talk to people in my community, people in minorities, people in other communities to participate, and we do that, and that's needed more. Okay, but in general, we need more education. We need people to be aware of clinical trials. The thing I'm telling you about risk in a clinical trial, that's what everybody worries. See, I'm also a human being. I could also be a patient. Okay, you could, God forbid, may need a treatment someday, right? And if there is a better treatment available for you, you'll want that treatment, right?
Sure,
for
sure.
you. And if the better treatment is available in a clinical trial at no cost to you, you'll definitely want it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that kind of information doesn't go down a certain level. I think we need more education, we need more effort, we need more diversity education, because people think that if you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you're only talking about minorities. Actually, it's totally the opposite. When you do that, you educate also the other communities. You also educate the people who are not diverse, who are not minorities. You educate them about it also, that what is the need for this thing. And this is, we saw with COVID, it started in a remote town that nobody had ever heard of in China,
Yeah.
and millions of people died. Okay, we are all connected. We are not islands. Diseases don't affect only one person or the other. It can affect anybody. Okay, so I'm not saying that we should only encourage minorities to participate. I'm saying we should encourage everybody to participate. But when we encourage, when we put resources into the people who are poorly educated, who are a lot of misperceptions, that will seep in even higher than other people, because that education is not going to go anywhere. When you write a book, everybody reads it. When you have a course, everybody reads it. When you make a movie, everybody watches it. Okay, it's not about one. When you create educational material, everybody will benefit, and we don't do that. So we need more of that. There are a lot of people who talk more but don't do much. I think we need to do more and talk less about it. And actually, publicity is important, but we need to do. We need to do, and I think that's what we need. We do need. That's what we need to change. Okay, because in terms of how trials are run, how they're managed, how their access is created, we've already done a lot. Okay, there's not much to do. You cannot improve. You can always improve everything, but there is not much significant you can do to change how trials are done.
Sure.
The only thing that is changing now, it's actually happening because of the lack of patience, is real world evidence. We're talking of, okay, people don't want to participate in trial, but they're coming to doctors, they're getting treatment. Can we get some data from the real world treatment and use it? So we are going backwards towards it. Okay, we are really, the only thing we have changed in the last 5 years is we have gone towards remote data collection to increase access, and we have gone towards real world data.
Sure.
Okay, but they don't talk really much about education of patients, which is where we lack. So I think that's the only thing I would say we need to do. Everything else we are already doing enough of.
Sure, awesome. And my final question for you is, as an industry expert in clinical trials, what recommendations would you offer to existing CROs and sponsors, trial sites or vendors to enhance patient recruitment and retention?
Well, see, I think it's connected to everything else we said already, right? So I already answered many of those things. Anybody who's interested in increasing clinical trial enrollment should spend more time in education, in educating communities. Go to communities even if you don't have trials and tell them what to do. I've spoken at science fairs, so schools, I've spoken at community events, telling people just in general about clinical trials. What are clinical trials and why should we do them? And even if you don't have trials for them, whenever I meet any doctor, I always tell them, are you doing clinical trials? Would you like to know more about it?
Yeah.
So, because yes, sometimes, it has happened also that people heard about it and they were so interested to do clinical trials and they couldn't find anything. And they were like, oh, I couldn't find a trial that I could find. And I'm like, okay, well, it's not just magic. It's not like it will not happen in a day. But, if you are aware of it, be aware of it, tell other people about it. So those things are always very important to keep in mind. So I would say that's my take home message, that spend more time in getting more people aware of the trials. Social media is a pretty big deal right now to tell people about trials. Having educational material available widely is very easy right now. You can simplify it. You can use AI to target populations. You can do targeted marketing of clinical trials. Social media is very important for clinical trial promotions. Very important, because we all rely on social media for pretty much everything right now.
Yeah.
So social media for information exchange, and also talking to people in general, like communities. Although we are more and more remote, but we are also more and more connected. So we need to remember that we need to talk to everybody. I talk to everybody. I know about it when people talk to me, and they say what I do. I tell them what's a clinical trial, and they will sometimes say, "Oh, clinical trial. I saw that on 2.5 Men. Somebody grew an extra tail on it," and I've said, "Well, it was funny. I laughed too, but I was cringe at the same time because that would never happen. If that happens, we'll not have a job." So. Yeah, I mean, that's about it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you for talking to me.